Leila de Bruyne, you are co-founder and U.S. Executive Director of Flying Kites, an organization based out of Kenya that supports schools as they help raise the level of education and basic services available to children living in poverty. In 2004, you traveled to Kenya to volunteer to teach economically disadvantaged students in the capital city of Nairobi. You soon realized that unqualified short-term volunteer teachers were part of the problem. Inspired by a growing movement to ignite community-led development, you co-founded Flying Kites, at the center of which is your teacher training center and academy, an innovation hub for your community of teachers and a model for your network of schools. Flying Kites focuses on girls, and your approach ensures that every girl has the opportunity to access critical information and resources related to her health, as well as how to use any of their newfound skills in a way that is most relevant to her. You work in partnership with Kenya's Ministry of Education to address critical barriers to learning by launching school meals programs and investing in water, sanitation, and hygiene infrastructure. Leila, you believe in inspired collaboration, helping those less privileged, and that enough, not just something, is better than nothing. Welcome to Cutting for Sign, Leila.
Hi, thank you for having me.
100%. Have been looking forward to it.
I've been trying to get you on here for a long time.
I
It's
know.
kind of perfect timing at this point. We're way better at our job now than before.
Yeah, I needed like 2 years to just really like self-actualize. I'm psyched. No, thanks for having me.
I'm super psyched.
I'm on my internet should be stable, but of course, like it's been stable all week. And then right before I log on, it says no internet. So I'm on McDonald's free Wi-Fi next door. Seems to work great.
That's amazing.
That's
Thank you, McDonald's. Billions and billions, right?
I swear, it's always something.
So yesterday, this might be a statement that is throwing Ron under the bus a little bit, but I thought it was a charming moment.
Here we go.
But yesterday, I'm like, so why do you feel so strongly about having Lila on? And he looks at me, we're taking a while, he looks at me and he goes, she started an orphanage in Kenya. Like, and again, I don't know if that's the accurate way to say it, but that's what he said. And I was like, okay, mic drop.
Well, it's funny, like as we were gearing up for Christmas, like, my dad's still like, how's the orphanage? And I'm like, it's not an orphanage.
Yeah, I figured it wasn't that, but I was hoping
No, but
to
it's
start.
like, it's one of those things where it's like, I spend so much time in this space of like international development that like certain things, just feel so like antiquated or outdated. But when you're like in the real world with like other people who have other jobs, many people are like, how's the orphanage? And the truth is like, I'm kind of at a place now where like, I'm a little bit more honest that like, our journey did very much start in that direction. But then when people give me the chance, I can be clear that like, and then we realized orphanages are a really bad model.
Yeah.
And there's a reason we don't have them in the US. And like, typically, not always, in my experience, when you take a group of vulnerable kids and you put them under one roof, it's really tricky.
Wait a second. So I wasn't aware that we don't have orphanages anymore.
We have.
I guess I was, but I didn't know. Like
in the US, like in the 60s, we started to realize like we have like what's called like group homes now, usually more for like teens.
Yeah.
You're not going to find, like a bunch of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, 300 kids in like an abandoned church the way you would have here, 60 years ago. Because we realized like it's not a great model. Like, you have to get honest about the fact that like you're never going to replace the family structure. So we moved into foster care here, which is really also very, very tricky. But
and when you say here, you meaning the United
States?
In
the US, yeah. So, here you're not going to find like an orphanage like you do in the movies with like 500 kids, at Christmas. We were watching like old cartoons the other day and there was this like orphanage cartoon in the US. And Kenya is moving towards that too. Kenya recognizes orphanages generally are not really best practice, Ron, you've got kids, like 300 kids in a building, it's especially when you're talking about kids who are coming from really tough situations, a lot of trauma, so you've got different ages, never enough manpower. But I started my career working in orphanages. And when we started Flying Kites, I was just kind of responding to what I saw, which was just this immense need for orphaned, previously homeless kids.
Yeah.
And then the longer I was in East Africa, the longer I was in Kenya, I started to realize, a lot of these kids have better options for care, sometimes even their parents, if not their parents, extended family. But the reason they're not in those homes is just because of poverty.
Wow.
So, anyway, not to get like too into it, but like, it's funny.
No,
like
we want to get into it. This is
orphanage is like, I don't want to say it's like a triggering word, but it's like, I have some shame around it because, that saying, like, when you know better, you do better. Now with my, however old am I, like 37, I look back at like I look back 17 years, and my vision 17 years ago, I would hope, is completely different, but it just feels like maybe that wasn't I know it wasn't the best way to meet the needs of these kids.
Wait a second. So you're feeling, hold on, wait. You feel shame being 20 years old and deciding to do something, and now 17 years later, you're still doing it.
Well, I'm coming. It's interesting you say that. I talk about this with Mike all the time. Like, I think I'm coming through the other side of that. Like, and I know, because I'm not as quick to judge other people. So when I meet other like humanitarians who are doing something that maybe I don't feel is the most progressive way to treat a problem, I'm less quickly to be like, oh, she's, they're not woke. They don't know the right. Now I'm like, oh man, like, they have really good intentions. They're on their journey. Like, they're going to figure it out, whatever we can do to help them. So I think I'm less of a sort of self-hating, humanitarian, but at the same time, I mean, somehow, like, I had my old desktop and I was like looking at old newsletters, and I was like, I can't believe I wrote that. You sound condescending, you sound patronizing, you sound like a white savior. You just don't understand how to talk about this vulnerable population. You don't understand your own complicity in all of these problems that exist. And so, especially when you're 21, it's easy to sound like an asshole.
Yeah, we were talking yesterday with David McRaney, who wrote some very interesting books. You are not so smart, and now you are less dumb. And we were talking about shame quite a bit, and like why shame. Or, sorry, this is 2 days ago. And why shame was it? Geez, I'm confused.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Just stay there.
You got it. You're a smart person.
Time is not my strength today.
I believe in you.
We were talking about the like evolutionary potential evolutionary reasons why shame exists, and because it's still around and it's in us, and
totally
we have fingers and mouths for reasons, and we have our emotions for reasons to keep us safe. And I think that that's actually a really good example of, like, you read something that you wrote 20 years ago and you feel to some extent shamed or whatever, you feel some strong emotions, and those emotions keep you from doing it again.
Right.
And that makes a lot of sense. Now, then the thing that we got into is like when that gets out of control and you can't let go of it. And now it's like a state of being, it is not doing any good. It's done its job. The box checked. Do you know what I mean?
Right. No, and it's interesting. I was listening to something the other day about that too, about how shame is sort of like, collectively we have to work together, and how a lot of people say, like, it's Darwinian that if you're like very individualistic and you care about yourself, you're going to go further. And this person, I can't remember who, an anthropologist, I think, was saying, actually, no, like when you look at the data, people who are able to think about the collective, like to think about the whole group, their community, altruistic, do much better and will survive better. So it's sort of like, it's Darwinian to actually care about others. It's not like innately who we are to just care about ourselves. But to that point about shame, I'm not drowning in my own shame. I haven't heard, like I said, since my dad last Christmas, I haven't heard orphanage. So I was like, whoa, okay, I gotta like reset. So I don't wake up and like have to like do my like mantra in the mirror, but it was like, she started an orphanage, it was like, oh, kind of did.
Hey, again, I was like pretty sure that was like a Ron's kind of funny way of expressing what you do to make it look like you're one
I
of the
even
best
knew
people in the world.
at the time I was like orphanage.
I
That's
knew
your
I was
like
not
gonna,
church,
sure.
I knew
that's
I
your
was
like
gonna,
church background, but that's like your roots, like
Oh
coming.
yeah,
That's
for
like
sure. For sure.
that's
My Christianese. It's
a lot of like the
Christian
orphanage I
accent.
worked the orphanage that I worked at when I was in college was, funded by churches in the Midwest. And, for me, it was like these families would come over, these like white women, these families, sometimes with their teenage kids. And, the orphanage that they were funding, that they were propping up was, I mean, it's illegal to house chickens like that in our country. Like if somebody had dogs or cats in this scenario, they would be in jail. And yet this is a situation that like people are applauded for, and they're excited every year to return with their kids. And it's just like, it's that mindset that it's like, well, it's better than nothing. These are poor orphans and it's 300 kids, they're sleeping on the floor, et cetera. But this is what we understand charity to be. This is what an orphanage is. And it's sort of like, yeah, challenging that mindset of what charity is. And I think a lot of it does have its roots in religion and colonization and all of that.
well, I was talking with a good friend of mine, it's David. Ron just met one of my close friends, not just met, but we spent a little time together. And David supervises a group home. And these are like all, I mean,
Troubled youth.
Troubled, yeah, I don't know if
Boys,
that's a good way to describe it. It's boys and girls.
Oh.
And
Is it? That's unusual. Wow.
definitely, yeah. And they're all, and it's interesting because it's called Trillium here. That's a pretty significant Portland. I don't even know what to call the organization, but they have like all these little campuses. They have a campus and then different homes, and then people lead each other. It's all so like the amount of guidance and structure around each kid, and each person supervising each kid and each person supervising the supervisors. It's a really intense organization, and it's all around keeping everybody safe and accountable. And then when I was reading a little bit about what you do, it sounded, I don't know how analogous they are, because it sounded like you work with schools.
Sure.
But it also sounds like you kind of are starting little schools. And I was a little confused about how that worked.
No, I mean, the parallels that you draw with your friend's organization are similar in so much as when we shifted from an orphanage model and really kind of listened to the community, how can we be helpful here? The answer that kept coming back was education. Like if we can get our kids in school, if we can get them learning, that's going to be like our path out of poverty. So we spent the first 10 years of Flying Kites just building one school and just being really thoughtful about our model, trying a lot of things, failing at a lot of things, pivoting, reiterating. And at that time, I had a lot of donors that were like, what's your vision for scale? And I knew enough to be like, we don't have a vision for scale right now because we're just focused on one really small school. And at any given time, every year we would add a grade. So at one point we had like 40 kids. Now we have about 140 kids, and it's preschool through 8th grade. But that school, we leverage that school as a model school for other schools in the district who are, they're usually public schools, and they're struggling. They don't have funding. So their teachers don't have support. They don't have access oftentimes to clean water. They don't have access to any sort of food. So it's the same in the sense that our school now acts as kind of a hub, and joined onto the school is our teacher training institute. So now we use our school as a place to kind of pilot interventions, and then we scale them to our partner schools. We have 6 partner schools, and really support those schools as they seek to kind of raise the level of education that they're bringing their kids, education and services.
So you've been around for quite a while now. Have you had some
15 years
kids like grow up and come back and like work for you? And
oh my God.
That must be amazing.
It's getting really fun. It's getting really fun.
That's cool.
We've got one little kid who, when I met him in 2004, I'm not going to pretend I can tell you how many years ago that was. He was on and off the streets, in and out of a shelter. He was a young kid. And he, where I was working was the slum. So it was the outskirts of the city. And, those big planes, the Boeings, get really low before they land. And he talked about being homeless and laying on his back and watching the planes come into land and always wanting to be a pilot. And we got him into school. He finished elementary school, went to high school, was just like unparalleled work ethic, really talented. And we were having the conversation about college, and he was like, I don't want to go to college. I want to be a pilot. I've always wanted to be a pilot. And, we're kind of looking at ourselves and we're like, there's to some degree, like we're not made of money in terms of an organization. And it's like, 40 grand to get your pilot's license. And this is one kid. We've got 5,000 kids in our network. But he was so determined that we set him up with one of our donors who met him and just was like, this is the coolest kid ever, to go from being homeless, orphaned on the street, to like being so clear in what you want to do. So this donor who is the founder of kayak.com, which is kind of a nice parallel because it's like all about flights. That's this perfect. Donor put him through flight school. And the week after graduation, I said to Paul, I was like, come to Kenya. He's graduating. Like, you made this happen. He's still like only 20 at this time, or like 21. So Paul flies from Boston to Kenya. Brian, the kid, graduates. And then we decide that we want to get a video of it. And we want Paul to go up in this tiny plane with like an infant. Like Brian, to me, I'm like, I look at him, he's still like 12. I mean, you couldn't pay me $1 million ever. It was like an East African safari plane, like very small, ashtrays, and I'm kind of a nervous flyer anyway, and what we didn't know is that Paul was also a nervous flyer. And we didn't want to tell him that this was essentially like he was going to be Brian's first guest. So we get there and Brian is like twice as nervous as Paul. I'm the most nervous, and Brian is very nervous. Paul is also nervous. Brian like buckles him in wrong. Like they're sitting in there, there's a special seatbelt and Brian gets it wrong. I mean, I can't even imagine. But they went up and Brian was incredibly talented and Paul was very moved. And we took an awesome video of it that I'll send you. And Brian was such an amazing student at flight school that they then hired him back to be an instructor. So now he's like an instructor.
That's amazing.
So, and like, they're not all like that. Like, there are some kids who, again, a lot of the kids, especially from the early days, like a lot of PTSD, a lot of trauma. Sure. It's not The Sound of Music. Like it's been a lot of these kids, some of them we weren't able to like keep in our program. And others are doing really well, but just like fighting for that every day.
Yeah. Ron, how would you do if you were starting something like this? Starting a school.
Like, my white man privilege, wisdom. What I kept thinking as you were talking was how you never gave up on like rejigging the model. Like, oh, this isn't working correct. And so instead of doubling down on that and just being convinced that it's going to somehow work, you had the generative thought process to go, well, what's a different thing to do? I mean, in my world, I've been in alcohol recovery worlds and some other drug recovery worlds, and nothing changes a person like having someone go elbow to elbow with them. In my experience that I've seen, like
elbow to elbow, what does that mean?
Like just being side to side, like we're here, I'm going to do life with you. I'm going to teach you how to talk to people. I'm going to teach you how to talk to yourself.
Like a sponsor or something? Is that kind of
like a sponsor or a counselor or a mentor of some kind?
Yeah.
Anyone that's just like, I believe in you.
That's right.
Like, I see you.
Yeah. And you've done that. You're doing that, in a way that you're replicating a core place and then creating teachers and I mean, I'm a dum-dum. I don't know how any of this stuff works, but it's amazing.
But I think it's changed a lot. I mean, I think if you 10 years ago, I would have thought that like I was going to be that person for the group of kids that we had legal custody of. We had a children's home.
Wow.
And then I had to get honest about the fact that that's a fantasy. And, I can try and unsuccessfully do that for a group of kids, or I can step back and realize my proper role is building a team of Kenyans who know way more than I do about how to respond to the needs of their community and these kids. And, my role is kind of fundraising, storytelling. We have a team in Kenya that runs the show. And, it was even like the other day, I was thinking about like some of our teenagers that have been with us for 15 years. And I was like, oh, when was the last time I talked to so-and-so, and feeling like, wow, like maybe I could have done better about like really following each kid. But I think there came a point in the crossroads where I was like, I am not the person to do this. Like, I'm not the person to do this work. More to the point, like I have no, and this is like, when you talk about like the shame of development, it's like when you're working in these countries that have incredibly limited infrastructure, you can have a huge outsized impact, right? So like you can go and like, but the other side of that is really kind of yucky and a bit scary, where, if I moved to Portland, I would not be able to at 21 tomorrow open up a home for 30 kids, because like we have, a sort of functioning infrastructure. We have enough money in our like civil society to create like an infrastructure that like some 21-year-old girl with a backpack can't come in and just start taking in vulnerable kids. Yeah. But in many places in rural Kenya, like there's just simply not that manpower, that oversight, and so you can do that, which, I mean, I feel lucky that I've been able to do this work and it's amazing. But at the same time, now sort of like coming through many years of it, like you realize, yikes, like I really had no business. Like I had no business just kind of like writing my mission statement and like opening a home and opening a school. Yeah. And so now thinking about just like working to sort of strengthen existing systems and ecosystems so that like we can get to a place where it's just not like this free for all for development.
Just for fun, what would you have done different? Not what would you do now, but if you had to do it again back then, what would you do different?
Or what would you say to a 21-year-old, person who has all of that heart, like their heart is breaking from population, and they're ready to put their life on the line.
Totally. Well, I'm lucky now that it's hard to say like what would I say, because like it was like 15 years ago. It was a long time ago. A lot was different. I think now it would be it's easier to sort of educate yourself much quicker. There's like just a lot more material out there, like how not to F this up. And I do talk to a lot of people who are in their early 20s and they're like, I want to start something. I want to, the first thing I say is like, and it's probably the last thing people want to hear, and I probably wouldn't have wanted to hear it at 20, but like, check out what other people are already doing and like, see if there's a way for you to work with them. You don't always have to like start something. Mm-hmm. See what's going on and see if there's somebody that you can partner with. But when you're 21, like, you think you know better and you don't necessarily want to hear that. What would I say to my 21-year-old? I would just be like, like I said, like, I think I've come, like, I've done enough of the work that I'm just like, I forgive myself for like not having like that perfect, politically correct, most progressive approach. Cause like I was working with kind of the tools that I had and now I have better tools. So I would probably just encourage my 21-year-old self.
Keep doing what you're doing.
I have it like that.
That's what I'm saying. It's like,
I mean, I think so. But now
you're just in awe that you could. And then,
I mean, and you have to be like 21 to like think that you have enough energy, like, but now when I do talk to people who are at the beginning of their career, like, I hope that I am able to give some like really good advice about like listening to the community and like giving the community ownership over what you're planning to do. So I mean, that's a piece of advice that like I think is really important. Like, don't come in with your own ideas.
What do you think about, and I'm going to kind of stumble through this question, but it's been on my mind a little while, the issue at least, and that's that a good friend of mine runs a vanilla bean export business out of Madagascar. And it has over the last, he did it about 10, 15 years ago, started it with two of his friends. And they were in the Peace Corps in Madagascar and grew to know a lot of the people there. And then vanilla beans are huge. So that became a business opportunity but now this vanilla bean export operation, which is the largest out of Madagascar, as I understand it.
Wow.
It's a huge business, and but it's all still very at the communal level. He's traveling over several times a year. He's boots on the ground, interacting with the farmers. Quite
paying like fair wages and all that.
It's a way for him to treat people well because he's a good person, and he's like helping things over there. And so it's kind of it sounds like you're doing something similar. And what it makes me think of is like we talk about colonialism is a huge conversation these days, and privilege, white privilege, male privilege, all these privileges. And it looks to me like you are using those, the fact that you can go over there and have an effect in a very positive way. Do you have people who are not proponents of what you do and saying that you're doing anything negative? And the reason I ask that is because I'm curious if more people, there might be more opportunities for like Americans or anybody privileged who has something to give to go and affect people, because it's such a wonderful thing for everybody, it seems. But maybe I'm missing something there, and I'm curious if I am.
I think a lot about this too. And your question was your question was a little bit tricky in the sense that I think you're asking, are there more opportunities for other folks to use their privilege?
That's part of it.
To go to developing countries.
And
so, what?
And should yeah.
And should we? It's like, again, it's like, I think about this a lot too. And like, I started my career as a volunteer. And I think it's like any day that you get me, I might give you a different answer.
Huh.
I think that the key is to be really clear about what your end goal is. So getting involved in any sort of philanthropic international development effort is like 100% no brainer. Physically going to the country, I think if done right, can be a really important part of like meeting the people and learning from them and becoming more committed. But I think if done wrong, it can feel like you're exploiting like the poor, and it's like, I get a lot of folks, and it's funny now that I'm a mom, I sort of like have more patience for it, or I see, I had a lot of folks, can I send my kids to Kenya for spring break?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting question, in the beginning I would have been like 100%. And then I was like, no way, this is exploiting the poor. And now I'm like somewhere in the middle where it's like, I think it's really important that our kids see the world and that our kids understand what the real world is like, but it has to be done within an infrastructure whereby they're not getting access to vulnerable kids. I don't care who your kids are. Like your kids shouldn't have access to vulnerable kids in a way that's outside of just like a summer camp mentor or something. Or, when folks just really, it's like, what can I get from it? So it's like, I want my kids to like be grateful for what they have. Well, it's not the role of our students in Kenya to educate your kids about their privilege. It's your role to educate your kids about privilege, and development can be somewhat of a tool for that. But I think like the priorities of the community have to come first. And like, it's like, we joke about this all the time in development, but like, we don't need you to fly to Kenya to paint a school. Like, you can hire a laborer for $1 a day. Yeah. But like, if you need to come and paint a school to like understand why global education should be a priority in your philanthropic giving, then like, come to Kenya, paint a school. But anyone that's like, we just really need that manpower, we really need that labor. Well, you're taking jobs away from local people who can probably do it better. It's like, we joke like volunteers come and then you undo what they did. And then you get the Kenyans to do it right, you know? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I think it's like case by case.
As you have mentioned earlier about my religious background, because of my religious background, I got to do many of those kind of experiences. And I think I had been on a half dozen, by the time I was 21 or something, 22.
Yeah, mission trips.
Mission trips, orphanages, schools, the whole deal, all over the world, Mexico, Africa, or Zambia mostly, but Botswana, South Africa, like that kind of, in Zimbabwe. But we were mostly based out of Zambia then, Thailand, Israel, I was an adult, 22 years old, when the orphanage guy that we were working with on the Baja Peninsula, he's like, you guys know that you're not, like, you're actually bad workers. Like, you're really, like, you just said it, like, you're kind of fucking up our orphanage here, with your construction and all that stuff. And it dawned on me, I was like, we're kind of this negative workforce here that's taking up resources. And I guess the resources that we're bringing, probably in the form of money or just playing, right? Like playing basketball with kids or whatever it was, it offsets that just enough that they allow it to continue to happen. And now that I'm a parent of a teenage boy, we live in a very privileged neighborhood, like a really nice zip code. And we live in a building that has mixed income. The building was made to be like that. And so we can see, even within our building, like, some families have a lot, some families are just barely making it. And yet outside this window, there are multi-million-dollar condos, overlooking the neighborhood we live. And then on the other side of our building is like the shanty towns that have been popping up all over the West Coast because of the opioid, problem and housing crisis and the whole deal. And we can't show our kids enough of the reality and through movies for them to truly understand yet. I think it's a developmental issue, honestly.
I think that is part of it too. You can put your kid in front of the most just awful humanitarian disaster, and they're going to be like, what's the Wi-Fi code? And I think just accepting that a little bit to some degree, that's just kids. I've met kids who are literally living the most disastrous situation, and they're like, can we get a smartphone? You know what I mean? At some point, and not expecting, that's a big thing for us is you want your kids to sort of have their consciousness raised and be a certain way. And it's probably, you definitely can get them closer, but they're still going to be teenagers who are sort of self-obsessed, but affording that also to the kids that we're serving. So we ran a child sponsorship program, and sometimes I had to be yeah, your kid dropped out of school. And it's this feeling of ungrateful, I just want a kid that's just so grateful for the opportunities. No, these are also teenagers who actually have overcome immense trauma. And so it's going to be even harder for them to just be these little awesome students. But we don't sort of afford that level of just messiness to the poor. It's you default on a loan, or you take that $5 and don't do exactly what I thought you should have done with it. We want the poor to be in line. You know what I mean?
Lila, did you we usually ask is there anything off limits to ask about? We didn't, so please feel free to dodge this question. But is there anything that happened in your life that made you ready to really do something on this level of compassion? And
I think in large part it was sort of having a really cushy life that set me up to have it shattered when I landed in Nairobi as a 19-year-old. I think being soft in that way and sort of just assuming that the world was a safe place, and then traveling to Kenya at 19 and seeing like a very violent level of poverty that 5-year-olds were, like, here, no matter where you are in the US, like if there's if you and I are having like coffee and there's like a 5-year-old walking down the road with no shoes that's like hungry, like it's not a perfect system, but like we could bring them into CVS and like call the, like there's a system.
Yeah.
And like in Kenya to like see homeless kids and like there's not that safety net. And, like 8-year-olds sniffing glue on the street and kids begging for food. And for me, it was just like, I remember like almost being like, does my mom know about this? Like, this can't be. What a
great thought.
I just remember being like this, I grew up like, just my mom just raised me just like so safe and everything was safe and predictable. And then like I got here and I was almost like mad at her. I was like, what about these kids? It was sort of just like outrageous to me. And it was like, and you try and like rationalize it. I think the way a lot of us do when we see suffering, even like the other day, I saw like a woman with 2 kids and a sign, like, my husband lost his job, I can't pay rent. And like, I caught myself doing what I know other people do, which is like, it was so unbearable to like see her. It's getting cold here in Boulder. It's like almost Christmas. It's like humiliating to be sitting out there with a sign. I'm like driving my nice car. And I caught myself like adding a little bit more to her sign than was there. Like I caught myself being like, well, what was his job? Like, I just like asking those further questions because like the pain was just like, it was so awful what I was seeing. And, in Kenya, when you come and you see that level of poverty, it's like, well, so, you hear these like stories like, well, the parents send the kids out to beg and they're just like, they're just hiding behind the dumpster. And it's like, I was there long enough and went back enough. Like, no, like these kids have nobody. They huddle together at night and they sleep on the streets and they sniff glue because they're hungry and hopeless. And I wasn't like hard to the world. And so like, I had no barrier that just like went all the way like in.
So,
no, you're right.
Why did you think you get there in 19 and then who told you that you were allowed to give a shit enough to like put this all together? Like what in your brain? Because I think a lot of us, like myself, I'll just use myself as an example. I did all that. I saw the poverty. I didn't see it to that extent, but I've been in parts. I was able to be in parts of the world by a certain point in my life. I knew the world was not okay.
Yeah.
But there wasn't that thing in my brain. A big part of it was my cultural upbringing. There was other needs that my culture was telling me I needed to tend to. But what about you? Like, why did you say like that's the switch that I have to do something about this?
Well, I think it was a long journey and it didn't start out like that. So like, I went with my college roommate, Justine, my co-founder, and our good friend, Toby, who's a third co-founder. And like, we went and just like volunteered. And then the next year we raised money and we went back and volunteered. And then the next year, this is throughout college, like we went back and every time that we went back, we sort of started to learn more. And back in school, we were reading like we read about Paul Farmer, whose work is outlined in Mountains Beyond Mountains, and just like read about him sort of starting this organization from nothing. And I think that the message had to be given to us like many, many times. We sort of like, we were obsessed with like convincing the founder of this orphanage. She was a Kenyan woman. We were obsessed with convincing her to buy land in the mountains. And like, they're in the slums where everything was just like polluted and hard and violent. And we were obsessed that if we bought farmland, they could have a farm and the quality of life would be so much higher and fresh stream water and all of that. And like, again, like that was our vision. It wasn't hers. Like she was from the slums. Her whole family was in the slums.
Yeah.
She also maybe felt like she needed to show this level of poverty because her income source, what were the churches, and they were signing up to pet the poor. And so by the time we got to our senior year, we'd kind of sold a lot of our friends' parents on this vision of like, we want to move this orphanage to a farm in the mountains. And then there wasn't really any willingness on the founder of the orphanage to move to the mountains. And we were kind of like, awkward, like we've taken so much money, like what should we do? And like my third co-founder, Toby, is British and just sort of like wild. And I think he was just like let's just do it ourselves. And Justine, my college roommate, is like much more conservative. And so I was like, I remember sort of like looking at her like, well, if she thinks it's a good idea, if he thinks it's a good idea, it's crazy. We shouldn't do it. But if she's also subscribing, like maybe it's not a bad idea. So we graduated in May and we moved to Kenya that summer. And by September, we bought 3 acres of like the most beautiful farmland you've ever seen. Like people think East Africa, you think like and this is like semi-alpine. You could be in Austria, like lush. We're at 8,000 feet altitude. We're in there's like wild elephant in our backyard. It is just like the most amazing place. And we have an expansive farm. We have bees. I mean, like we really just take advantage of every aspect of like being in the most beautiful. And we have a huge campus that I think a lot of people, you know, one of the things I'm most proud of is like, we didn't contextualize it for poverty. Like, we didn't build like a less than average building because we were in a really poor community. Like we built like a state of the art campus. You know, it's millions of dollars into these buildings and they are stunning. And for me, it's like, I think that piece gets missed a lot when you're talking about the poor, is that like, they also deserve like beauty. The
access to things that expand their understanding of possibility.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, or even, it's not even me expanding their possibility. It's me making a statement about my own intent. So it's like me saying like, I'm not here to like water down services and give you something I wouldn't give my own kid. It's me saying like, I understand that this is not about charity. This is about equity. And just making that statement of intent and having it be just aspirational versus just like, here are the bunkers that we built. We wouldn't have built them anywhere else, but we're in rural Kenya. So
is there, when you do come here and you see like the woman and the kids on the road with the sign, what do you do?
I just, I did what everyone does. I just sort of like, well, first I looked at her and then I quickly looked away. And then I felt like, I don't have any cash, but maybe I can, I mean, it was like, it's a conversation that like everyone has. Like, I looked at her, I looked away and I was like, that's too awful. Then I tried to justify it, that there was something less awful that I was missing.
Yeah.
And then I realized I don't have any cash. And I just looked at her and just like tried to just look like a mom and just smile at her and her kids. And it was like, I can maybe just not show that like I'm afraid to look into her. Like I can, you know, and then I had the conversation that Mike is sick of having with me, but like nobody has cash anymore.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like we don't allow like poor people to like innovate, but like we should start, like, I would Venmo, like, wouldn't you Venmo? Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, what if there was an organization that like, nobody has cash? Like I might have 2 quarters, but like, there's still homeless people. There's still, you know, and it depends. Some people are like, don't give homeless people money. Like some people are like, when you come to Kenya, if you see a kid begging, like, just don't give them money. It fuels it.
Well, I think that there's definitely I like the Venmo type of thing.
Do you though? If you saw, but do you like it? Like if you walked out today and you saw a homeless person was like, my Venmo is, you would laugh.
What I was going to say was I like the Venmo thinking because I think that there's an idea for innovation and a niche there to create something. I'm not saying that Venmoing is the answer, but there's something there that can go, that can become cash dependent from cash or independent from cash. But what I think that personally, what's important, one of the things that's important that I do value around that moment where you do see people on the street is doing what you did is like, how about one of the things I can always do, whether or not I have cash, whether or not someone invents a cashless way to provide some money.
Oh, look at him. I'm the one that came up with it.
That's not what that was about. Is to feel like, it's just to feel like I smile and nod and have a conversation, you know, with in that moment all the time. And I've noticed just by body language and sometimes the words that are said that that means something to that person. To
Yeah.
have a human interaction that is accepting and equal and just like, I'm here with you. I'm not going to say it's better than money. I would not say that, but fuck, it is not,
Yeah.
it's not what you might think it would be, which is, yeah, I just want your money. Like, I've never gotten that. And I have this experience a lot. I'll roll my window down, be like, how you doing? And I'll crack a joke, have a moment, you know, a human moment. And there's like psychological warmth that comes from that.
Right. Just like recognizing someone as a human being.
It's cool too. It's actually really enjoyable, you know, for them and for me. And then of course that should come with, hey, here's a little money. And many times it does with me, because I tend to have like some change or something. And also, like, nobody carries cash. Well, buy some quarters, like grab some quarters and fill them up.
Carry cash.
You don't even make it a thing. Anyways, I'm just curious, because that moment is an important moment, I think, and it's a potential human moment that it's so easy to look away. And I still do that. But I always like force myself to be like, fuck this, you know, like.
Yeah. It's not even the look away that's bad. It's like the glance and then the ignoring.
Yeah, that's true.
Awful. And I'm like guilty of that too, you know, or imagining what they would do with money that you really have no idea. Or like people are like, you know, I've got people that say to me like, oh, you know, this organization or this person in East Africa needs this amount of money for something, but like, how do I know if it's legit, or how do I know? And I'm like, look, you can do due diligence, but at some point, like, you just have to be like, what is it to me? Like, if I send this guy $500 and like, he doesn't do what he says he's going to do, like, what is it to me? Like, am I okay losing that amount of money? Because like, I actually believed, you know, we talk about that a lot too. Just letting go, like
I was just thinking about how often we as Westerners squander opportunity with all kinds of dollar signs attached to them, whether it's, you know, something dumb, like I'm getting into a new hobby and I've spent thousands of dollars on this new hobby that then sits in the garage hanging from hooks or something like that. And then we have this insane, possessive over even you know, half the amount or a quarter of the amount into someone else. That it could be life changing.
I mean, where we are in Kenya, you know, we like to say that it's kind of like at the intersection between poverty and prosperity, you know, where literally a gift of $2,000 to a family of 4 can change their socioeconomic trajectory forever. You know, like, you give a family of, you know, your size $2,000, they can rent property to farm, they can buy a dairy cow and all of a sudden have another source of income. And like, they slowly, now they put their kids in school, then they save a little bit, then they fix their roof, they slowly pull themselves out. Conversely, like a hit of $2,000, you know, like all of a sudden your dairy cow dies, or there's an extended drought and like, you know, you planted your farm and nothing came. Then, you know, your kids aren't going to school, then your roof starts to leak, then you get sick, then you can't afford the medical bills, like, and then you start catapulting into even more extreme poverty. So it's like the purchasing power of the dollar, like where we are, is wild. Like, it's just wild. I mean, you as an average family here can have an outsized impact in Kenya. And like, and that's amazing to me. Like that, you know, that there are a lot of things that are like really complex, but like the way your dollar operates in Kenya, and like, you know, the truth is like, people aren't squandering money. You know, I love, like, I always hear like the term social entrepreneur, and I'm like, every single person in Kenya is a social entrepreneur. Like, every person like in our community, you know, they're like trying to start a business for the benefit of others, you know.
So let's say someone had $20 they wanted to send over. I know it's like hardly anything, but where would a good place, how would that happen? What's a good way to do that?
Well, so if you came to me with $20, I would tell you to ask Ron for 12. And then with $32, you could provide a warm meal every single day a kid is in school for a year. So like, you think of what you spend $32. It costs us.
It's stupid.
It costs us $32 a year to give a kid in our network a warm meal. And before they were having these meals, many kids were going from like 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. with nothing to eat. It's like, you imagine how like hangry you get at like this time, like, you know what I mean? So, and that's kind of been the challenge of some of our messaging at Flying Kites, is like, as you grow and as an organization, you get some like bigger funders and you're excited to sort of like project that. You also want the folks who are giving $32 to know, like, no, this is real. That really matters. That's a ton of money for us in Kenya.
So it'd be two organizations like you. I mean, I really want to know, like, if I had $20, I want to give it over there. Like,
yeah, give it to Flying Kites. Give it to us. I'll send you the link.
Please do. So, you had put a link up, I think about this time last year, or no, it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. And things were on lockdown and access to food was crazy because of logistics. And you threw some number, it was like some number like that.
Yeah, it was, and it was a family of 8. It was like, I have to look, I'm going to misquote it. I got somewhere there, but same thing. I mean, we fed like 6,000 families throughout the whole lockdown. We provided food. I don't want to say we fed. We provided food for like 6,000 families throughout the lockdown, because like the families that we work with.
So that's roughly 18,000 people.
Yeah. We have, and it was like a certain number of tons. And I mean, it was incredible. And we have this awesome community here, and it's not huge.
And I want to just tell Daniel and whoever's listening, that cost me personally, Ron Cecil, I don't know. I can't remember.
It was like $30. I keep looking over here because I have the actual number, but it was like, but that actually, all of it went to a family of 8 who ate for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
What I was saying is, like, the families that we're working with, like, they're a lot of times, mostly they're farmers, casual laborers. So it's like you, Ron, you're a father of 3, 5, whatever kids. You wake up in the morning, you hope that like you're going to get picked up to work on a farm. So like you wait, you see if there's an opportunity. If there is, you'll make $1.50, $2 a day, adjusted for purchasing power. And you'll use that money to buy food like that night. Like you'll use that money to buy on your way home. You'll buy rice, you'll buy oil, you'll buy firewood. So there's no like pantry, whereas like, oh, now you don't have job, when Kenya was on lockdown, it was like, you can't leave the house. There's no savings fund. There's no pantry. It was literally like, now you're 3 days out and like you haven't eaten for 3 days. And what was hard for me is like the community that we work in, a lot of like communities that have a ton of NGOs and a lot of charities just have a different sort of vibe to them. Our community is like a very old time village where everybody kind of knows everyone's business, but like folks are generally very proud and private. And, I don't know how, but their kids, like every day their clothes are scrubbed, they look like pristine. There's very much like a pride to our community that you see in like old town communities. You don't really find them so much in like cities and stuff, because it's like, oh, so-and-so saw me today at the market and, whatever. When COVID hit, like the level of like just sheer desperation that these people descended to was really scary for us. Like we've never had parents like begging for food or like telling us like that they're really scared for their kids. Like folks just aren't like that. Like they're not so outwardly vulnerable. They suffer silently and privately, but it was just like really hard to all of a sudden see like these folks who you've worked alongside for years, just like desperate for food.
Leila, I know we're out of time here. Is there anything else you wanted to say about this? Or, I know we were talking about like a hard end on the time side.
No. And it's great. Sorry, I'm like, it's the last day before Christmas. So I was like, last day before no work. Yeah. No, I just want to say like, thank you guys for what you do. I love you. Like your willingness to just like think about this and like create this space to have these conversations. Like, I'm just getting to know you, Daniel, but like Ron, like the example that you leave in the world, like as you show up as like a dad and like a husband, that had such an effect on me. Like, we spent a couple of days together a couple of years ago, and like watching you, like the way you support Morgan and just like the way you are in the world. I love that.
Oh, thank you. I am humbled by that, because you're making an actual impact in thousands of lives, and the fact that you have made it accessible for regular people like myself to participate in that. I mean, so tonight, we've been doing this every year as long as we've been married. We go to Flying Kites, or we have I think about 6 or 8 organizations that we regularly give to. And then at the end of the year, we'll also do like a cow purchase or chickens or bees, or we'll do a few. Each kid gets to pick something. And that's kind of the way we try to spend like the biggest chunk of Christmas money.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that's like going back to the kids, you know, I know your kids are like at that age where like having that conversation, like rather than forcing something down their throats, like saying like, starting to ask them like, what lights you up? Like, it doesn't have to be poverty or education in East Africa. Like, how do you feel about our oceans? Like, how do you feel about, you know, rainforests? Like, you know, or if they're so little, like pandas, like just getting them to start asking like, what lights you up? You know, like and for me, it's like, there's so many exciting projects, and it's like exposing your kids to different things, and like you just never know what's going to be that thing that's like, you know, it might be homelessness in your own community, it might be, you know, and so like letting them explore that, I think is really a cool.
It's really great.
I think too, like just a last note for me at least is you know, if a person doesn't feel like they have a lot to give, like money wise, what I've noticed, and this goes to just like investing too, just like in the stocks situation or whatever your investments are, it's just like opening the space to start, you know, like take an extreme example. Let me donate $1, but you have to build the infrastructure of how to like make the call, but you know, it's just like start it.
One of our biggest funders is a foundation called One Day's Wages. And it was started by this guy who just donated, he calculated what is 1 day's wages for me. And he just every year donated 1 day's wages. And now it's like an enormous funder because all these people go and they donate 1 day's wages.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
And I love that.
Are you guys taking cryptocurrencies at all?
No, we should figure that out though.
I'll connect you with some people who are really smart. And that's I have my own story around that, but my biggest draw to any of the cryptocurrencies was the unbankable population on Earth. And I
would love to connect about this. And Mike is thinking and talking a lot about that too. Yeah, no, we're just like psyched if we can figure out how to take Apple Pay. So like, we need to,
no problem.
We need to figure it out. Anyway, you guys are the best. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Merry Christmas to all you guys. Happy holidays, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Field dressing, Cali for Sign, episode 46, I believe. 46? 47?
Yeah, episode 46 plus the prologue, 47.
Yeah, that was great. Flying Kites. Like she said, we met 5 years ago at a small like retreat of creatives like her and myself and Morgan and some other folks, and that's where we met. And we were, you know, I think all of us were about her age or maybe a little older, and we were all like, what are we doing? You know, we were looking at our businesses and things like that and going, what the fuck are we doing? Like this, like, she's providing education and foundational needs to people who, like, this is actually life-changing stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't want to downplay any of the work I do or I have done over the past, but it feels a little Mickey Mouse. You know, it feels a little Mickey Mouse to talk about your feelings with a person when she's like, oh, you're hungry? You have no access to food?
I hear you. Okay. Quick question. Like,
yeah.
I know this is like podcast business.
Yeah.
But can we do the Instagram live? Can I try?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. I really want to get in that.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Let's do that.
I know. So pause. Hang with us. Because I have something to say about that.
Okay. Let's go live here and then. Are you gonna go live too?
I would like to, but I don't know how to do it. Can you do it, motherfucker?
We gotta get you.
There's Instagram.
Okay, turn on Instagram. I like that. That's awesome. Okay, check this out. Let's just go live. Mine is not live yet. I haven't pressed live, and we can edit this stuff.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So you go to the plus sign right here.
Yes.
And you hit live.
Okay.
Okay. And then when you're ready, you are going to press that live button.
And that's it?
That's it.
Okay, but I want us to both be in it. We good?
Yeah, we're good, buddy. So good.
Well, there's so many screens.
Yeah, they were live. Cutting your sign, field dressing, episode 46.
Leila de Bruyne.
Leila de Bruyne. I want to say Leila de Bruyne, one of the co-founders of Flying Kites, an organization in East Africa and Kenya, who started with her roommate and another friend of theirs 17 years ago, it sounds like. And
not an orphanage.
Not an orphanage. And I knew that as I was
I know you did. I was trying to communicate that.
Yeah.
That it was your way of saying of like making a joke, but I don't think that landed. I think it just ended up making you look like an asshole. That was on me.
Which is true.
I knew that was coming. That's like which is true. It's one of those things where it's like, all right, I know this is gonna make him sound like a jerk, but I'm pretty sure I can do a preamble that will cover your ass. And it just didn't work.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We fucked up. It was fine.
Okay. So, all right. So the thing about this was a theme that came up in this conversation was someone says something that's someone doing something incredible like Leila does. She's starting a group of schools or heading a group of schools in Kenya. It sounds like mainly the hub school is like really her. And then they end up being a model for other schools to like really get their stuff together. And then so we're talking to her about that. And then, you know, one thing I noticed that you do is that you'll be like, this is a little bit of shame, I think. Is you'll be like, how can I don't know how the words, you just did it right before we went live. And I was like, yes, we need to talk about this. But it's like,
the shame. Oh, okay. We were talking when I first met Leila. I met her in a environment of creatives and business people, mostly coaches, honestly, who were together to kind of learn some things together, support one another, just be there for each other. And I remember personally thinking, I won't speak for anybody else who was there, but I remember thinking, what am I doing? Like I do get a lot of reward from helping a man walk out of shame or helping a man like see himself through new light. And she even had briefly mentioned in the interview that she looks in the mirror and says some affirmations. Like that's the kind of stuff I teach. But I felt shame when I first met her because I'm like, well, I'm doing that one person at a time. Meanwhile, she's feeding thousands of families. Not only is she feeding it, we're giving them access to food through her work, but she's also providing education, and it's going, you know, it's growing well beyond even just her.
Yeah, she's doing a hell of a lot more than you are seemingly.
Totally.
At the same time, and I think this is like one of the most important things to talk about around this subject is like, we were talking about shame with Dave.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
That's a good example of how shame, in my opinion, can be a call to action. You know, jealousy a lot of times for me is a call to action. Like I'll see someone doing something because that's like a potent thing in my life. I like to learn skills, you know, and I'll get jealous. But like that jealousy, all it is a call to action to like for me to incorporate that some way in my life. Or sometimes because you can't learn everything all the time, you know, you let go of it and you just admire and you got to confront that jealousy. But I think that shame can also be a call to action in the way that you're talking about.
Certainly.
It's definitely not something you just want to let like stew, right? And you just keep feeling. It's like that's something in you telling you make an action. What's weird though, and it gets a little fucky, is like that can spin out of control. And now it's not a call to action, it's just a state of being where it's like the shame is feeding back and it just like spins out. So I just think the whole discussion is really interesting and valuable.
It is valuable.
And sorry.
Yeah. And I that she is a person who is modeling for us what you're describing, which is even as a young person, she went to Kenya and felt the shame of the difference between the insane poverty that she was witnessing, that not only poverty, but this human suffering, the addiction, all of that humanity at its worst in some ways.
Yeah.
And she felt her own levels of shame and embarrassment and shock and decided to take action towards that.
Yeah.
And I had a similar moment at the, right as the George Floyd experience was happening to us nationally, and really paying attention to certain issues that I hadn't been paying attention to before, in particular, minimum sentencing. So when a person does something wrong in the law, there's now these laws all over the country that, oh, you fucked up, the minimum sentence for that now, which was made to try to be a deterrent, has now created the largest prison population in the country or the world.
Sure.
And it's really fucked up. And at that moment, I stood up in my living room, I yelled at my TV for this existing. And I thought, what's the fastest, easiest way for this white guy who doesn't know shit about anything to change this? I can give money to lawyers who do know how to change this. And I talked to my wife, and we went and got on the computer and set up automatic donations to organizations who are actually fighting for the things that could reverse those kinds of laws. And I realized, like, oh, if we could get enough of us to do that similar thing, to make it a regular part of our living, like, we can actually begin to change things. And that's what she's doing. That's her whole life, is she's telling the story of the suffering, not taking, allowing herself to be creative and allowing herself to be wrong. What I mean by that is she's testing different models. This didn't work. This didn't work. Maybe this will work. Oh, hey, this one's working. And inviting people to participate in it. And even giving herself some grace for that past shame, like where she was like describing, man, I fucked up. Well, she didn't say that. It was cringy to me how I was before. And now I see my heart in the matter. And I think there's no, she's wrestling with all the emotions of it. And I'm got lost.
I don't really know how to discuss as much about, like, people should do this and help this, but I get a little tuned out when it comes to like that. Like, that's up to everybody. I know the little things that I know how to give back, but I'm really curious about, and I get kind of engaged around, is like when someone feels an emotion about like that makes them feel shame or small, and then what do you do with that?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And I think that there's like a difference. We can tie that to the personal actions, like you made that day. That's great, but when does shame and negative emotional experiences, because we're dominated by our emotions, like they're a huge part of our life.
Yeah.
When are they useful, like in an evolutionary, this is why this emotion exists way?
Yeah.
And then when do they become folded back on themselves and just invalid, hurting us? They're helping nobody, and then how do we like untangle that and like choose something different?
Yeah.
And I think that is that's the personal grassroots work that a person can do, is like get our emotions and our thoughts to start to align and give us, each one of us, to have agency and choice based on emotions, and not have our emotions force us into choices and words that don't represent who we really are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. David McRaney said in the previous episode of this one, to bring curiosity to those emotions.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard because they're too strong, but yeah, agreed. Like, and what the kind of thing that spurred this topic for me, and this is something that some people do, where we'll hear something that's bad, and they'll say something to the effect of like, yeah, what am I doing? Like belittle everything that they give most of their life and attention to. It's like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Like, what you're doing, if it needs to change it for sure, make incremental steps toward it, definitely. But like, the idea of holding opposites is huge in my mind right now. And it's very human, and it's allegedly it's one of the more human and frontal cortex things. It's like a very good thing for us to do, is to be able to hold opposites. And I really like the idea of me not belittling, and maybe that's a better word sometimes than shame, just like belittling like the things that I give my life to because other people are suffering. I don't, I would have to talk for a long time as to exactly why, but like I went on like a date, recently, right? And I'm listening to her, and I'm also thinking about this, not thinking about the date, like half of my attention is there, but that's not what I'm saying. But like, I'm thinking about, in context of what she's saying, was like, oh, I went on a date, spent $60,
right?
On a drink and a sandwich.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, do I feel bad about that? Hell no.
Right.
I did that with integrity. I remember speaking to the bar person, like, well. I remember we had a nice human interaction. I remember a little conflict that almost happened. I was like, no, I like repped society well in that moment, you know. Also, just note to self, that $60 could have fed fucking like
2 families
people
all year.
you know?
Yeah.
And so like, what am I gonna do with that?
Yeah.
You know, and I just think that holding opposites and like get rid of the beating ourselves up. It's fucking,
totally.
it's like, maybe it's good for 5 seconds and then make an action on it. And then outside of that, get rid of it.
That's right.
If one can. That's easier said than done.
I want to plug her organization one more time before we end this. Flyingkites.org.
Yeah.
You can go there and give.
It sounds great.
It's really great. They are. I have participated in a lot of missional experiences that were on all kinds of scales, of winning souls for Jesus to building things and being there, and their organization Flying Kites is doing it in a way that was beyond my understanding when I first heard it, and is scalable. She talked about one of her donors going, how are you going to scale this? And it was a question she hadn't even considered, but now they're doing it. And the scaling is going like, look, here's a model we think we could do.
Scaling meaning like?
Scaling is like, how do you replicate this? If you can do it for one person, how can you do it for 10? How can you do it for 50, 100? And their model of educating educators locally and empowering locals to do this thing is really, really powerful. So please go, feed a family. Go help those guys feed a family for a year. Or more than that.
I didn't get the impression that what she's doing had anything to do with religion. Does it?
Not at all. Yeah. No, there's no religion. Yeah. Other than charity, which is a value of religions.
Yeah.
That's what it's all. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.